10 days before I even unlocked the front door, someone quietly redrew a county map and stole my land with a red marker. The morning I showed up at my grandfather's old lake lodge, coffee still hot in my hand, the HOA stormed my dock like I was burying bodies instead of unloading lumber. I hadn't even unpacked a hammer before a woman in a wool coat tried to evict me from property my family had owned since 1934. Yeah, that happened. You ever wake up thinking you're starting a peaceful new chapter, only to realize you just walked into someone else's cover-up? I'd spent 15 years working remote dam sites out west. Loud places, tense places, where one crack in concrete could flood an entire valley. Pine Hollow Lake was supposed to be the opposite of that. Quiet water, tall pines, a lodge built from thick Montana timber that had outlasted 3 generations of Mercers. When I stepped out of my truck that first morning, fog drifted low across the lake like a blanket pulled slow off something sleeping. The air smelled like cedar and wet earth. It felt like an apology from life. Then came the heels on gravel. Sharp, fast, angry. She walked straight down my shoreline like she owned gravity itself. Bright wool coat, hair pinned tight, clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon. Meline strawed. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew the type. The kind of person used to being obeyed before she finished her sentence. You. She barked before I could even say good morning. You cannot begin construction without HOA approval. This shoreline is under our jurisdiction. I blinked at her over my coffee. Ma'am, I'm unloading lumber. That is construction. She shoved fresh printed papers toward my chest. The ink wasn't even fully dry. New boundary lines drawn in thick red. My lodge, my dock, my driveway, boxed neatly into a sudden HOA expansion dated 10 days earlier. 10 days, right before I arrived. You don't work around dams for 15 years without learning how to spot pressure cracks. And that map? It was a crack. How do you own land my family's held since 1934? I asked. Her jaw tightened. We own what we say we own. That right there told me this wasn't about noise or compliance or some bylaw buried in a binder. This was about control. And when she glanced, just for half a second, toward the water, I knew it wasn't the lodge she wanted. It was something under it. That was Act 1. The confrontation. The intimidation. The bright yellow violation notices nailed to my porch the next morning like warning flags. Demolition threats. Environmental inspections. SUVs creeping past my driveway at a crawl. Tinted windows tilted toward me like dark, blinking eyes. They came hard and fast, hoping I'd fold. What they didn't know is I don't fold under pressure. I study it. A young county clerk named Clara Pennington called me that second day. Soft voice, steady rhythm, like someone used to speaking carefully in offices with thin walls. Mr. Mercer, she said, we receive an HOA boundary expansion filed after hours. It includes your parcel. The signature doesn't match previous filings. There was. Someone had used a restricted portal 10 days before I arrived to redraw jurisdiction over land that wasn't theirs. You ever get that feeling when the quiet isn't peaceful, it's holding its breath? That was the lake that morning. Later, as the water dropped during a dry spell, I saw it. Steel. Old, riveted, military-grade steel anchored beneath my dock, thick enough to outlast wars. Not something you'd casually sink for decoration. Something deliberate, structural, strategic. When Clara came by, with archived surveys from 1934, my grandfather's name stamped on every page, the twist finally surfaced. He hadn't just owned the lodge. He owned the submerged land beneath the east half of Pine Hollow Lake. Every dock, every buoy, every underwater support beam on that side of the shoreline sat on Mercer land. The HOA hadn't been trying to bully me over aesthetics. They were trying to secure control points. If I owned the lake bed, their entire guaranteed lake access model was a house built on someone else's foundation. And here's the thing about power. It panics when it realizes it's standing on borrowed ground. They escalated. Midnight safety inspections. Board members crouched by my dock with flashlights, measuring beams like thieves in reflective vests. I caught them red-handed. Sheriff Nolan Briggs caught them worse. Then came the final push. A demolition notice claiming my lodge was a structural hazard. They showed up in a trio, Meline in front, board members flanking her like nervous backup singers. "You're obstructing an HOA investigation," she snapped. "No warrant, no entry," I replied. She leaned in close enough that I could see the crack in her composure. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." "Oh," I said quietly, "I think I do." That was the turning point. Act 2. The counterattack. I called Derek Hall, a land attorney who'd wrestled water rights cases in 3 states. We laid the documents across my kitchen table while a storm rattled the windows. Authentic 1934 deed. Survey stamps. Notary seals. Every legal foundation predating the HOA by decades. "You don't just own the lodge," Derek said. "You own the lakebed. Their enforcement structure collapses without your shoreline. So we did what you do when someone's been operating in shadows. We brought light." The HOA meeting was packed. SUVs lined the hill like it was a tailgate before a championship game. Meline stood at the podium, polished and composed, warning homeowners about a threat to community integrity. That threat being me. When I walked to the front with my satchel of documents, the room went quiet in that tense, electric way small towns do when something real is about to happen. I projected the 1934 survey onto the screen behind her. You could feel the air change. Stamped, filed, notarized. My grandfather's name clear as day. Submerged land rights included. Gasps rolled through the room. Meline laughed too loudly. "These are irrelevant. They're the law," Derek replied, holding up county authentication from Claire's office. Then I projected her forged boundary map beside the original survey. Even a kid could see the mismatch. Shifted lines, inconsistent signatures, and then the final nail, portal access logs tied to her credentials, time-stamped 10 days before my arrival. That was the explosion. Homeowners turned on her in waves. Not because I shouted. I didn't. I just let the truth sit there. Let it breathe. Sheriff Briggs stepped forward. This became a county issue when you falsified a public record. You could watch her unravel in real time. Confidence draining. Board members physically stepping away from her like fraud might be contagious. Here's the lesson I learned standing there. Power doesn't corrupt quietly. It convinces itself it's protecting something bigger. She told the room she was protecting Pine Hollow. What she meant was she was protecting control, protecting dues, protecting leverage. Fear dressed up as leadership is still fear. By the end of that meeting, the HOA was suspended pending investigation. Enforcement powers frozen. Fraud charges looming. Act 3. The aftermath didn't feel like victory at first. It felt like uncertainty. Homeowners showed up at my driveway the next morning, not angry, worried. "You ain't here to take our docks, are you?" Old Bentley Carr asked, leaning on his cane. "No, I didn't fight to inherit power. I fought to stop someone from stealing what wasn't theirs." So I gathered them at my dock that evening. Kids playing near the reeds. Lantern light flickering. The lake finally breathing easy. "I'm not here to replace one version of control with another," I told them. "I'll grant permanent easements. Fair, affordable, legally locked. No future HOA, no developer, no politician can rip them away." You should have seen the relief wash across that shoreline. Fees would go toward lake preservation, not private pockets. Transparency instead of threats. Turns out, owning the land under their docks was enough to sink the entire HOA. The lake that night was glass still. Stars reflecting like silver dust across the water. For the first time since I arrived, it wasn't holding its breath. And neither was I. Here's what stuck with me through all of it. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like restraint. I could have demanded removal of every dock. Could have crushed property values. Could have made them pay for every yellow notice nailed to my porch. But what would that have proven? That I was just another person addicted to leverage? The steel under that lake taught me something. Foundations matter. If you build on something you don't legally or morally own, eventually the water drops and the truth shows. So let me ask you this. If you discovered your entire community's comfort was built on land that was rightfully yours, would you enforce every inch of your power, or would you choose something steadier? Where's the line between standing your ground and becoming the very thing you fought against? I stood mine. Not with a hammer, but with a deed. If you've ever had someone try to bully you with paperwork and confidence, only to realize they were standing on your foundation all along, tell me, would you have handled it the same way? Drop your take in the comments. I want to hear where you draw the line between justice and retaliation.